American media claims this story is being over-exaggerated. What's your reaction to that?
That's absolutely not true. We've been talking about this as an organization for the last 20, 30 years, and you've mentioned the statistics now. It's the most dangerous position that you can be in, is to be a farmer in South Africa. There's less than 30,000 farmers left in a country with 63 million people. And I was now for 2 weeks in Europe, and just during the time that I was in Europe, there were 5 farm attacks and 2 farmers killed during a 2-week period. You've mentioned the severe torture of farmers in South Africa. So if you look at this, 49 people that arrived in America in the last 2 days who received refugee status from the Trump administration. These are people who went through really terrible situations of farm attacks, of being persecuted, who lost their land due to land invasions in the northern parts of South Africa. These are people who really don't have any options left in South Africa. I would love for them to stay in South Africa, to live here, to have a prosperous future. But the reality is that they've lost everything.
Yeah, I doubt that.
Guys, so there's an interesting show I just found, because right now the Afrikaners now are driving us to the US to study US media. So there's an interesting American show I found in the US called Rob Schmidt. I think that's the name of the host. And, he's actually trying to really break down and understand this whole problem with the Afrikaners that have actually been tagged refugees and now really invited to the US, all right? And one of the things that really interests me in this, his attempt to understand, is his interview of this guy from, I don't know if this is the Solidarity, but it's the Solidarity movement, Jako Kleynhans, all right? Jako Kleynhans. He's been interviewed here, arguing and really giving some really powerful thoughts on what it is for an Afrikaner to leave their home, to choose to be a refugee in another country, all right? But Rob Schmidt is actually, first of all, trying to analyze how it is that, the left media, the left-wing media in the United States is criticizing this move by Donald Trump to rescue or help these persecuted Afrikaners from South Africa escape persecution. And I've seen many of your comments on this channel speaking about the cross, lots of crosses. I think I've now stumbled on that, on those crosses in some documentaries I've been watching, a land filled with white crosses, and they argue in that documentary that those crosses are symbols of farmers that have been murdered over these years, all right? Now, what is most interesting is that Rob Schmidt, who is an American, is showing this on his show, all right? And it's mind-boggling, because I really don't know how the Americans would react to this. In fact, he brings out, it's just really, I don't know. He even brings out the video. I think there's a video of Julius Malema arguing that a revolution demands killing. And that, that's the, one of the basic tenets of what a revolution means, all right? And I'm really just putting myself in the shoes of an American watching that on American TV, and really trying to really, although I know the Americans are well versed anyway with all of our history in Africa, with the Rwandan genocide in 1994. They even were the ones who actually went ahead to make the movie Hotel Rwanda, with the protagonist there later having a clash with, I think there was still a clash, that protagonist, his name is Paul Rusese Baniga. He was the hotel manager at that particular hotel, but I think he was ethnically Hutu and his wife was a Tutsi, and so this is what brought them into the middle of the clash, the tribal clash between these two tribes, that ended up into the popular 1994 Rwanda genocide that left millions dead. Paul Rusese Baniga. So who knows? I think maybe the Americans might even do another, movie about these Afrikaners, and that one is going to explode. In fact, maybe the Afrikaners might even do them this, because I know these are the Afrikaners in South Africa are well advanced, in terms of this kind of technologies and all of that. So many times I'm just imagining how an Afrikaner movie on what probably would be these farm mothers. Now, this is a movie now on these farm mothers would be received by the global audience. But these are just things I've been thinking about, putting myself in the shoes of an American, watching what this Rob Schmidt had to say about these crosses in South Africa, and how he then criticizes how the left, I think the left now will now be CNN, because I used to enjoy CNN a lot growing up, you know, as a young black Nigerian kid. CNN, whenever there was CNN, I used to want to go and get knowledge about global affairs. CNN was there, BBC was there, and all of that. But he's criticizing them for ignoring the fact that most of these farmers have been complaining about murders for the last 30 years in South Africa. He actually plays a clip that you guys have to really watch this one till the end. He plays a clip showing these crosses. I think it was a kind of like a funeral. There were lots of cars on the road, and there were lots of white crosses. And he argued that those crosses were crosses of farmers that have been murdered, or I don't know if they're farmers, but maybe family members of farmers that have been murdered brutally in South Africa. And then he now shows how it is that the left media are, you know, politicizing the fact that the refugees which Donald Trump is bringing into the US are white, and trying to show that that's part of Trump's white nationalist agenda, while silencing the death of these Afrikaners in South Africa going for. So this is the argument Rob Schmidt. Let's just quickly watch Rob Schmidt really break down these things, and I'll be back for short thoughts on Jako Kleynhans' interview. Jako Kleynhans has a lot of details to really give to us in his description of what it is that this solidarity movement in South Africa has been complaining for many years. And I'll be back quickly.
Welcome to Rob Schmidt Tonight. You know, it took some creativity, but the Trump administration finally found a way to turn the American left against asylum. White refugees. After 4 years of valiant cries defending fake asylum seekers pouring in through our southern border, 4 years of cheering as Joe Biden spent your money, and a lot of it, to send jets to third world countries to pick up as many people as he could find, we are now seeing fury toward the asylum process as 59, not 59,000, literally just 59 South African white people have arrived here in the United States. They came in yesterday. They're called Afrikaners or Boers. They're Dutch farmers who've lived in South Africa for generations. Their families, hundreds of years. Their descendants colonized an essentially empty South Africa in the 1600s, while sailing around the bottom of Africa to head to Asia for trade. If you've never been, South Africa is an incredible place. These are some of the pictures of the times I've been there. A spot of land nearly as prime as California, beaches, mountains, wine country, incredible weather. It is an absolutely amazing place in this world, and it is collapsing as we speak. Listen to the rhetoric from a mainstream political party, the third largest in South Africa today.
Kill the poor, the farmer. Kill the poor, the farmer. Brr, pa, pa, brr, pa, pa.
You've seen that video before, I'm sure. That's Julius Malema. He is the head of the Economic Freedom Fighters Party. That is a big political party in South Africa. And what you just saw is thousands of South Africans screaming to kill the white man, to kill the Boer, at a mainstream political rally at a huge stadium. They want to retake their country from white colonizers by murder, retake the farmland, which is actually an idea that was tried in Zimbabwe 25 years ago by Robert Mugabe's government, taking land from white farmers and giving it to black families. That idea led to starvation and famine. Here is more from Julius Malema.
These people, when you want to hit them hard, go after a white man. They feel a terrible pain because you have touched a white man. Starting with this whiteness, we are cutting the throat of whiteness.
So there you have it. You see why there's a need for asylum. And some are acting on these calls. From 2019 to 2022, there were more than 1,400 farm attacks and murders. The vast majority, like 90%, were committed against white farmers. And the details are horrific. A father murdered in front of his pregnant wife and their small children. A young white farm manager strangled and then tied to a pole. A couple severely beaten, their farm then set on fire. There's a lot of these stories. Almost none of these cases are ever solved because the anti-white South African government has no interest in solving them. Post-apartheid South Africa is heading for the same fate as Zimbabwe met. South Africa's president has signed a bill allowing the same seizures as Zimbabwe allowed 25 years ago, so long as they're done to be more, quote, equitable. Of course, the left's favorite word. Video here shows crosses. You can see them there on the side of that highway. Each of these crosses, and it goes on for a long time, represents a white farmer that has been murdered in South Africa. Can you imagine that? And yet here is how the CNN lefties covered the story last night when just 59 South Africans arrived here on Monday.
Violence does not equal genocide.
That's
so
right.
We need to be really, really clear about that.
So what's the difference between the refugees that they're talking about here and those refugees?
I could guess. I mean, I think everyone...
They're white.
They're white. Thank you.
I think what we see very clearly here, Chris, is a white nationalist agenda at work, and we need to call it for what it is.
That's so deeply and morally wrong-headed and repulsive. These are the descendants of the people who created the most diabolical system of white supremacy in human history, apartheid.
So they deserve to be murdered? They're the descendants of Dutch colonizers from 400 years ago, so they deserve no protection, according to the white idiot on MSNBC. Okay. The current media narrative here in the West is that Trump only wants white refugees. That's what you're going to hear all about this. And that's the claim. It's outrageous, but that's what they're going to say. In reality, he just wants real refugees, people actually escaping death and persecution, things like that. Not the billions around the world who are simply impoverished, unskilled, with no ability to assimilate in our country, who are looking for a nicer place to live, and also not entire populations of failed nations. We can't import an entire country of people, no matter how bad they want us to. And opening our southern border to the world was not asylum for the last 4 years, no matter how many times they tell you that it was.
Yeah, so you could imagine yourself now. This was a report from Rob Schmidt, and put yourself in the shoes of maybe the left, those Americans who support the left media in the US wouldn't be surprised about these murders, all right? But put yourself in the shoes of maybe a conservative in the US really watching this video of these crosses. It's scary, the number. And these crosses are still there. It's not as if, I don't know if are they still there? You guys should help me know in the comments anyway. But to have that monument, those pictures still in the land, and the family members always having to go there and all that, you can imagine the continuous pour of anguish on the land of South Africa. People really living every day, but living with pain. Man, I really don't know anyway, but it's not, I don't think it's something that, it's the kind of thing that might even demand a sort of like a national, is it a national reconciliation? Because in Ghana, during my studies in PhD, when I studied Ghana's history, there was an attempt at national reconciliation after the military took over in 1979, what was called the June 4th, 1979 revolution. And 3 ex-presidents and some military generals and all of that, they were executed as victims of that revolution. And at the end of the day, there was a kind of like a national reconciliation by the families of those who were victims in that kind of like activity by the army, and just to reconcile the nation, the pain and all of that. So I think maybe this kind of farm murders, with the number of dead people, I'm beginning to really see. just in my preliminary watching these documentaries, I'm yet to have Ernst Rust's book, but I've heard that that book has a lot of data as well. There might be a necessity to have a kind of like a national reconciliation to really alleviate some of this pain, really. But I don't know anyway. This will be a story for other days. But now, Jako Kleynhans, I'll be playing his video soon, but I thought that I just want to give some of my thoughts on what he's actually trying to say. He speaks about how there are some laws in South Africa that are affecting all minorities, all right? He speaks about these difficulties, racial quotas in almost all sectors of economy. He speaks about these racial quotas even in university admissions. And one of the parts of that comment that touched me so much was, there was a comment on this channel by a 16-year-old. She says her mother has been a single mother ever since she knew her. And that the mother has actually also struggled to find a job because of these whole issues, I think, with BE and all that. Now at 16, she's really wondering if maybe she would take this offer to probably have an opportunity to improve her life going forward. And you can imagine such a comment. It's a painful one for a young girl of 16. I think somebody then advised her in the comment. It's here anyway. If you go through the comments, you'll read it. Somebody advised her to not to hesitate to take this offer and hopefully build her future, because she's just 19. She still has a long way to go, and she's arguing that she's not seeing those opportunities in South Africa. And probably if she continues, she might end up being I don't know if she became a single mother because of these farm mothers, but she's just really afraid that she doesn't want to end up in this situation. I want to have a little bit better life. But these are kind of like the comments that's on Kwazemi alone, bro. It's tough. It's tough. So Jako Kleynhans here is arguing that they've been complaining about this thing for more than 20, 25, 30 years. The farm mothers, I think, even if I remember correctly, Ernst Rust argues that it was the farm mothers that made him an activist. The farm mothers made him become an activist. He didn't expect that he would be an activist in this world. All right. So it was that touching. He actually argues that, South Africa was promised to be a rainbow, an example to the world of liberal democracy. But what it is today, bro, it's something that you don't. And this is one of my problems anyway, is that we in Africa, the wider African populace, especially the young people, don't seem to understand what's really happening in South Africa, all right? And so this is what we are doing on this channel, to really educate. And for me, it's an education. I'm educating myself because I never really knew about these aspects of this country, South Africa, from this angle. I mean, like, I've studied many African countries, Uganda, Ghana, Sierra Leone, especially West African countries, but I still know a little bit about Kenya. I still know a little bit about East Africa. But South Africa seems to be like that black swan, that is like a wild card that people really do not understand. And that's why I think, it's really important that Jako Kleynhans here is arguing that South Africa is slowly becoming a failed state with unemployment. He says the recent unemployment figures seem to be 54.4%, and that black people, this is the crux now that really blew my mind. He said black people are also paying a serious price for this whole persecution. But for me, I thought that the laws were supposed to benefit the blacks. But now he's arguing that blacks are also paying a huge price for all of these laws that seem to be limiting the minorities. And I don't know how to understand that. It sounds like a contradiction. But let's quickly listen to Jako Kleynhans really finalize this video with his thoughts on the future of South Africa going forward, and his description of why it is that these Afrikaners have decided to pack up their bags, leave everything behind, and go to start afresh a new life in another land where there might not be friendly neighbors, there might not be friendly environments, but they decide to start from the bottom to rebuild their lives. And share your thoughts, guys, in the comments.
Jako Kleynhans is a South African native who's been speaking out about the atrocities happening in his country, and he joins us now. Jako, thanks so much for coming on. American media claims this story is being over-exaggerated. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, that's absolutely not true. We've been talking about this as an organization for the last 20, 30 years, and you've mentioned the statistics now, you know, it's the most dangerous position that you can be in, is to be a farmer in South Africa. There's less than 30,000 farmers left in a country with 63 million people. And I was now for 2 weeks in Europe, and just during the time that I was in Europe, there were 5 farm attacks and 2 farmers killed during a 2-week period. You've mentioned the severe torture of farmers in South Africa. So if you look at this, 49 people that arrived in America in the last 2 days who received refugee status from the Trump administration. These are people who went through really terrible situations of farm attacks, of being persecuted, who lost their land due to land invasions in the northern parts of South Africa. These are people who really don't have any options left in South Africa. I would love for them to stay in South Africa, to live here, to have a prosperous future. But the reality is that they've lost everything.
Yeah, I doubt they wanted to leave. I've visited there, and the country, when it's safe and prosperous, is probably one of the best places to live in the world. And I really mean that. I mean, it's a spectacularly beautiful place and has such rich, fertile land. The leader of this political party, the third largest in the country, has repeatedly called for the genocide of whites in the country. Let's just take a listen to this.
Must never be scared to kill. A revolution demands that at some point there must be killing, because the killing is part of a revolutionary act.
Is there any reaction to this? I mean, it feels like your government does not want to solve the crimes committed against these people. Is there any reaction to that by your official government, or do they just not want to act like it's not happening?
Yes, they're acting as if it's not happening. You know, we've been asking for many years that farm attacks must be declared a priority crime in South Africa. The President, Cyril Ramaphosa, have repeatedly said that there's no farm attacks happening. He told that to President Trump during his first term in 2017 at the United Nations in New York. He recently, as recent as yesterday, said that this is absolutely not true, and these people are just taking chances, you know, to go to America and to get a free pass to travel to America. So they're completely not recognizing this crisis of farm attacks. And I must also just emphasize that it's not only people on farms that are attacked. You know, you have the same kind of violent attacks and tortures in small towns in South Africa. Like you've said, it's a wonderful country. It's a country where we've been for 370 years, but people are persecuted every day. And I think that's a fact. It's a reality. And I'm very happy that President Trump are brave enough, you know, to put this on the table, and that he doesn't fall for the kind of narrative that was put forward by the mainstream media over the last few years.
I want to ask you kind of a tricky question to end here, but it's been 30-something years since apartheid ended. Apartheid was obviously in a country that's majority black. You had a white government, and we heard constant cries about how unfair that was. And now you have the opposite. I mean, the government in South Africa is run by the black population. Is it any more fair in the country, or is it less fair post-apartheid South Africa?
Yes, well, the whole narrative in the 1990s was that South Africa was supposed to become this liberal democracy in Africa, this rainbow nation who will be an example for the rest of the world. But since 1994, 142 laws were instituted in South Africa that discriminate against minorities, especially white South Africans, but also colored and Asian South Africans. And that extends to university admissions. It extends to applying for a home loan, to apply for very basic things every day, to get a contract to do business with government, to get employment. There's very strict quotas, racial quotas in all sectors of the South African economy. The result of this, and I think that's very important to understand, is, and you've referred to the beauty of South Africa, the potential of South Africa, is that our country is becoming a failed state. Infrastructure is falling apart. The economy is not growing. It haven't grown for the last 15 years. The unemployment rate is constantly increasing. It was announced yesterday that the unemployment rate is now 32.4%. The black people in South Africa are also paying a serious price for this failed government of corruption, of racist policies, and extreme discrimination against minorities.
Jako Kleynhans, thank you for the perspective from a South African. Thank you, sir.